What's going on, everybody? My name is Rye. I do a little bit of media stuff here at Force Performance. And what we got here, we got this thing we're going to do, a little series here we call Spooled Up, pun fully intended. And we're going to go over some tech stuff. There's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misinformation out there on the internet. And we're going to try to clear up some of the muddy waters for you guys today with this series. And we're going to start with the basics. Today's topic, we're going to talk about turbocharger selection and the considerations that you need to take into account when you call up Force Performance, you order your turbocharger. I'm here today with owner, operator, founder, the man, the myth, the legend, the brains behind the entire operation, Robert Young. Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing real good, Rye. Thanks for having me in here today. I love talking about turbos.
Absolutely. And you are the man to talk to in regards to pretty much everything. I understand that you have been involved in some pretty cool stuff over the years outside of the typical drag race world that I'm used to or street car stuff. Is that correct?
That's true. I've helped I've helped land speed cars, Pikes Peak cars, watercraft applications, boat stuff, Great Lakes boat stuff. It's a lot of fun, man. Just always like to find a way to make a little bit more power and do a little bit better job of packing that air in that motor.
Awesome. So you have been doing this for, I don't know the exact number of years, but I would assume a couple decades at this point.
More like, yeah, 30. Like, I guess,
Okay.
that 96, 97 is really kind of when I started doing this.
Very cool.
Or I was
So
building turbos for people. Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people out there. The reason I ask that is I've seen it. I've seen people question this. I don't think a lot of people know how long FP has actually been in the turbocharger game, or you have been playing with turbochargers well before a lot of these other companies that are out there were. I think a lot of people are hearing the FP name due to recent expansion into some other avenues like you talked about. You're branching out. You're kind of, if it's got a turbo on it, we want to play with it. That's basically what it boils down to.
A lot of people kind of think my name is synonymous with Mitsubishi's,
Yeah.
Mitsubishi turbos, and for many years I was the largest distributor in North America for Mitsubishi heavy industry turbos. We got plaques on the wall to show for it.
Yeah.
We moved a lot of Mitsubishi turbochargers over the years. It's less of a thing now, but when the DSM and the Evo were as popular as they were, these such great cars, we sold a lot of 16Gs. We sold a lot of modified versions of turbochargers into the Mitsubishi market. So a lot of people kind of know me for that, but we've participated in a lot of other markets also. We've helped Tile develop a lot of upgrade turbochargers for Porsche applications. And we've always worked really strong with Tile, really strongly and tightly with Tile to develop new products. So we've always helped them, the projects they were working on for Audi and Porsche, in the early 2000s. And then that kind of morphed into Subaru applications, developing billet wheels for the Evo application was necessary because the turbo turned the other direction. So that led to billet wheels. Billet wheels led to, hey, well, let's not just make billet wheels for reverse rotation Evo turbochargers. Let's do some nice engineering and come up with the best aero we can, and also upgrade Garrett turbochargers. So then we started doing a lot of modified Garrett turbochargers, and one thing led to another, and here we are today.
So I'm seeing a reoccurring theme here and kind of how it got started, and that is OEM fitment. That was where you guys really shine until FP started making these high performance replacement turbos that bolt on. But it required you to either have the skills and the tools and the knowledge of fabrication or a pocketbook deep enough to pay somebody to go and fabricate. You kind of broke the mold with that, where you can make big power. We can upgrade your turbocharger on your vehicle, and it will be a bolt-in. You can do it with basic hand tools, working in your driveway, and you've been doing it for 30 years. Like, that's impressive. So how many times a day do you think you get this email, message, or phone call and say, what turbo do I need?
Not enough times. I'm always happy to talk about this, but we do. This is the question you always answer. you know which model do I need? Here's my goals, and this is the power I want, and what's the best turbo for me. And
Sure.
there's always a little bit more questions, there's always a little bit more info you need before you can really get to the bottom of it and make a great suggestion. You
And,
know,
and not to cut you off, but before we go further, what is that information like? If somebody's going to call or message you, what is the best information for them to have right off the bat? Like before you even send the message, what do you need to know from
what
them?
could you just include in that initial message
Yes,
that might
yes.
be
How to be
able to
prepared.
let me? Yeah, yeah. So what would I want to know? I would want to know what the car is, what the engine is, what the intended application is. Is it is it a class racing car? Is it a street car? Are we going to run it on street fuel? Are we going to run it on race fuel? What are we going to do with it? I also need to kind of have an idea of the power band that you're looking for in the motor. Are you looking for something really peaky between 6,500 and 9,000? Or are you looking for something that's a lot broader and maybe starts at 4,500? But if it starts tapering off at 6,000, that's okay because, you know, maybe you have a transmission you don't want to shift above that.
Hmm.
You know, so I need to know the engine, the application, what sort of boost pressure you expect you're going to operate at, what the power goals are. I need to know about the weight of the car. If it's an automatic transmission car, you need to tell me a little bit about the converter and about the rear gear and about what what you're going to do with the car. And I don't need, you know, I don't need to know, well, sometimes I'm going to go get ice cream, but then sometimes I'm going to go to the racetrack. What do you want it to do good?
Right,
Okay.
right.
You can take any car and go get ice cream with it, but like, do you want it to be best at getting ice cream, or do you want it to be best when you pull it off the trailer at the track?
Yeah.
Because we're going to tailor how we bring the power in a lot different depending on what you're going to do with the car. So that's that in a nutshell. Those are the things. So I need to know the displacement of the motor, the power band that you need the power me to give you the turbo to facilitate the power band you're looking for. If it's manual, I need to know a little bit about the gearing and the application. If it's automatic, I need to know a little bit more about the converter, and you need to be a little bit more specific about what RPM band you really do want to focus on.
Hmm.
You know, because if you got a converter that doesn't couple up hard until 5,000, we don't need to be worrying about spool, do we?
Right, right.
Okay, so you know, there's some things that just come right off the table, right off the bat, just because of what some of those answers are. You know.
You can't necessarily always have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it all the way all the time. I can't make a four-cylinder car make 1,000 horsepower with a single turbo and no nitrous, and then also be able to leave a stoplight and not be a complete dog until
Yeah,
7,000 RPM.
you can't have part throttle boost response and then
Hmm.
also have something that's tailored to work at 8,000 RPM and be, you know, targeted at 8,000 RPM, but then also has good part throttle boost response at 3,500. You're going to have to kind of pick what
Sure.
are we going to do, you know?
Okay, so that's a lot of the wave tops there, and he's throwing a lot of stuff out there. And if you guys are following along, talking about street versus race, converter versus clutch car, four cylinder, and what he's encompassing there is he's talking about what Robert is trying to. We're going from your four cylinder Subaru guy. We're also serving the same customer like myself that's building a twin turbo big block to go do drag and drive stuff, and I want to make
Yeah,
2,000 plus horsepower, or maybe I want
yeah.
to make 450 horsepower on my Evo because it's, you know, I'm going to mod it up a little bit, but it's just a nice little Sunday drive. Whatever the case is,
Mm-hmm.
know what your goals are. Like you said, I think a good thing what I tell people is, prioritize. I want to run. If your number one goal is to go and set the house on fire when you go to the racetrack, but you want to street drive the car, well, you're gonna have a car that's kind of pretty good at the racetrack, and it's gonna be miserable on the street. It sucks. As somebody
Bingo.
who drives
Right
a race
there,
car on the street,
right there.
it sucks. It's not fun.
Yeah,
It's loud. It's hot.
yeah.
You smell like gasoline. Girls don't think you're cool. So,
Everything's rattling, it's noisy, you can't
yes.
see the radio, you don't have an air conditioner. So if you're in something like that, then we take a lot of the like table manners out of the equation, you
Sure.
know, altogether,
Yep.
because you're basically talking about a trailer car at that point.
Yeah.
Now, a trailer car that could drive to the track if it had to, you know, with you know some slicks on the roof and some radials on the car,
Yep.
you know, but you're not gonna be fun. It's not
Yeah.
gonna be fun to ride to the track.
As somebody, you've done them, I've done a handful of them with moderate levels of success, i.e., finishing as well as helping out on some winning combinations with the drag and drive stuff. It's a ton of fun. It's a lot of work. It looks cool on the internet. It looks cool on paper. And I think the phrase goes, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparing yourself to what other people are doing. And the internet has made it so 1,000 horsepower ain't much anymore these days. It's kind of easy to make. And so a lot of people will think, I absolutely have to have this. And
Can I
I'm here to
jump in
tell
there?
you, yes, please.
Yeah, about that point. Because you're asking like, what is the question? How often do you get the question, what turbo do I need? And a lot of times that's one of the first things people throw out there is like, well, we're going to make about 1,000 horsepower.
Hmm.
And then you start listening to the rest of the stuff they're talking about, and you're like, you're not actually going to make 1,000 horsepower. You don't actually want 1,000 horsepower. You don't have tires for 1,000 horsepower. You just told me about your drive line. It's not ready for 1,000 horsepower. You just told me about your motor. It's not ready for 1,000 horsepower. Basically, no part of what you just explained to me is set up for 1,000 horsepower. You want to buy 1,000 horsepower turbocharger for me, and I'll sell it to you. But I want you to know how disappointed you're going to be.
Yes.
You know,
When a stock '03 Cobra pulls up next to you at a stoplight with 400 horsepower and walks away from you and puts bus links
yeah,
on you for the first eighth
because
mile.
because
But
you got a 3,000 stall converter.
yeah,
you know,
I've become so jaded
mm,
in over the years with drag racing, and I forgot how much fun it is to drive a car with around 450 horsepower and a manual transmission. It's a blast. It's an
that's
absolute
a sweet
riot.
spot
It's
right there.
the game has changed so much, so drastically. We're saying all this, but the reason we're going down this, we're trying to set a reasonable level of expectation of what you're going to get when you call up. You can put it in priorities. I want to pick 4 things, and this is what I want the car to do best. I want this to do this okay. Think of what you want this car to do and the mannerisms you want it to
Be
exhibit.
realistic about it.
Yes. And I
Don't
would,
don't lie to yourself about what you're going to do with the car.
if you're like Robert and I, and we've been in this for quite a while, and I'm sure Robert, you can attest to this as well. The amount of people that you've seen come and go in this industry. I know
Oh
when I
yeah,
was in my 20s, I looked around at all my friends that I was racing with. I was like, man, we're gonna do this the rest of our
it
lives.
goes forever, but
And now here I am, 40 something years old, and I look around, and none of those same guys are here anymore. I'm the only
this
idiot that has
hobby
kept.
is not for the weak of heart, man.
No,
This is
no.
this is not you. You have some of the biggest heartbreaks of your life are related to all the money you spent on your car and then you broke it.
Yep.
It takes its toll for sure.
But the
But
the reason
I want to hit a thing that you just talked about there with the street car. Okay, with the 400 500 horsepower street car versus the 1,000 horsepower drag car. Um, you can drive the 500 horsepower street car wide open, all out. Okay. You can't drive the 1,000 horsepower car all out on the street.
yeah.
You're just going to be off the road in a
Hmm.
heartbeat, So you end up driving the 1,000 horsepower car around real lightly and not really doing much with it because it's scary and it won't a lane is as wide as a lane is, right?
Yeah.
It's not as wide as a drag strip is at all. Okay. And you see 1,000 horsepower guys use the whole damn lane at a
Hmm.
drag strip with prep. Okay. Where are you? You're on a 2 lane blacktop, County
Hmm.
Road 1472 or something like that. And it's both sides of it are as wide as a drag strip lane. And you're going to try to stay on that with 1,000 horsepower and it's chip seal asphalt surface.
It's
No
it,
way.
it's a party trick. It's a party trick, is what it is. It's watch this. I can light the tires and swap the car across 3 lanes of traffic from 70 miles an hour. That looks cool on 1320 video. It's not really cool when it does it unexpectedly, and you're just kind of you forgot you left the boost controller on, and you're just leaving the track. Like I've been that guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'm expecting 600 horsepower, and I was dealt 1200. And yeah,
yeah.
it'll wake you up real quick. So to get back to like we were talking about when you look around and the people that are here with you, if you are one of these long-term not very smart people like Robert and myself who stick with this and you think you have a long future of spending endless amounts of money that you don't really have to impress people that you don't know, well then maybe you want to future proof your application with it. I'm sure you've gotten this where you kind of talk somebody off the ledge but they keep coming back. My friend said I need this, or so and so needs this, or I want 400 horsepower now, but next year I want 600. Is there a difference between a 400 horsepower and a 600 horsepower turbo? Let's say 4-cylinder, 2-liter, 2.5-liter application?
For four cylinder, a 600 horsepower turbocharger will do 400 horsepower pretty well also.
Okay.
So that's a kind of a range there where you can have both things and you don't get a bad result.
Hmm.
You might get a better result if you pick like a 450 or 500 horsepower turbo. You might have a better all around car for, a car with air conditioning, a car you're going to put miles on every year. That would be a smarter choice. But if you want something that you're going to be able to go run nines on and then also street drive around with air conditioning, then you are going to have to kind of split it up a little bit with what you're after, because you need something a little bit more like a 650 horsepower car that you can turn down to 400 horsepower and still have it satisfy the fun button for daily use. And with direct fit turbochargers, with their tendency to have smaller runner manifolds and smaller turbine housing ARs and things like that, because you're transplanting bigger parts into factory parts,
Hmm.
essentially, that's easier to do.
Hmm.
So with the direct fit stuff like greens, reds, and black models for DSMs, Evos, and Subarus, um, uh, those are the places where you can kind of have both.
Okay.
When you get into tube header kits and stuff like that, then you're really going to end up focusing more on the bigger power end of it, and your part throttle and your wideness of range of your torque band, your torque curve is going to be decreased.
Right. So there's a number of reasons there why that would be decreased. When you're comparing, like you mentioned, a tubular manifold or a fabricated header kit versus an OEM application where it's usually cast manifold, the name of the game there is response in an OEM application. I remember the first time I ever saw the turbos off of EcoBoost F-150, I was like, I don't understand how that thing makes any power. I believe that the turbine inlet is about the size of a $50.
Yeah,
But that's how you need that to make what's it, just 3 point something, 3.6
yeah,
liter
3.5 or
V6,
3.7, yeah,
and
and
you
so
need this thing to roll down the highway and make 10 pounds of boost with a trailer behind it and a gas motor and a V6. Well, you need little teeny tiny turbos.
that at 23% throttle will make 10 pounds of boost.
It's the difference between horsepower and torque, essentially. Torque, people talk about like, well, a car makes torque. It's going to leave a stoplight. It's going to be real fun. That's true. A car is also still making horsepower. It's just not making a whole lot of it because it's not turning the RPM. At the end of the day, horsepower wins races, period. RPM and horsepower, small motor application, turn it to the moon. That's going to be usually your faster combinations. And torque is more fun on the street. How do you get more torque at lower RPM? Well, bigger motor, smaller turbo. And that's the name of the game, to make something feel fun.
And if you've got that real soft converter in there, it gets
Oh,
really annoying, because then
yeah.
the motor just comes up to 3,800 or whatever every time you need to move the car. Oh, 3,800. It's like, well, why can't, it's just a 3,500 pound car. I got a 6 liter V8. Why is the car not moving at 1,800 RPM? You know what I mean?
Yeah, as somebody who had a 6 liter V8 with an 88, arguably kind of a small turbo for that application, with a 180 first gear and a power glide, yeah, it feels like it's broken when it's leaving the stop. You feel like you have your foot on the brakes when you're leaving
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stoplight, driving the thing around town, and it's just the converter and the trans, everything's just getting hot, and you're staring at gauges, and yeah, it's brutal. Terrible street manners is the reason my friend Logan sold his car. Had a beautiful RX-7 with a 2JZ swapped into it with a
Oh, that
power
was
glide.
that was beauty, man.
Absolutely gorgeous car.
Yeah.
Well, he took it to the track, ran a personal best, and then a week later he posted it up for sale. I said, "What changed?" And he goes, "I drove it to the store. It sucks. It's terrible in the street. A 2JZ with a power glide that doesn't make any boost until 7,000 RPM. And then when you're at 7,000 RPM, by the way, you're already going 100 miles an hour. And it
Yeah,
won't
but that
spool anything.
shift into high gear is something else, though. And
Front wheels are still
yeah,
doing 70, the rear doing every bit of 170. And yeah, it's not fun. You need that starting line strategy. That's how you get these small motor, big turbo cars to work. So it looks cool on 1320. It looks great on the internet. But there's things that we can do as racers to overcome that massive turbo. For street car application, for something that you're going to drive and you want to enjoy, don't think you need the biggest one at the car meet. Like, it's not, size matters, but it doesn't. Size matters. That's like, oh, we should make a T-shirt for that. That should be the new slogan.
yeah.
Size matters. The size of the turbo needs to be complementary to the size of the motor and the application that you're going to utilize it in. Street car stuff, realistic expectations is the biggest thing of what you want to accomplish. And if you're not really sure if what you're thinking about doing is possible, these are the people that you call and ask these kind of questions for.
Yeah,
And that's why
not
we're having this conversation.
everybody wants to do the same thing that they saw 14 threads about on the internet.
Yeah, everybody wants to be unique.
You really want to put some limitations on how unique, though, okay? Because I want to mount the turbocharger really low in the front bumper. That's going to be great. That's going to look so cool. None of my buddies did that. Well, have you ever studied what you need to do that correctly? You need a dry stage sump pump. You need an accumulator tank underneath the turbo. You need some check valves. You need a vent on the accumulator tank underneath the turbo. Don't just think you're going to stick that turbo in the front, in the fog light hole on the front fender, and you'll just figure it out.
I just went through this.
You're going to be on the phone with me for weeks, okay, trying to figure out how to get the oil to get out of that turbo and back to the motor. Okay, and I'm not going to laugh at you, but I will be grinning a little bit as you step through all the phases of it. Oh, what do I need a vent for? Oh, what did I need an accumulator tank underneath the turbo for? Oh, why did I need to check valves? What is all this? This is a bunch of money. And I'm like, you're the one that wanted to get fancy, man. You could have put the turbo where it would drain normal, but you added this extra complicated step to the program that you're working on, and you probably didn't think it was going to add a lot of complication, but it sure did. A lot of people love the way low mount turbochargers look, and I like them right up in the grill like that too. I mean, you get ram air, you get fresh air.
If you're a real fast radial guy, you're talking about what your instant center, and you're trying to keep the front end down, you put them out way low and way long as far as you can.
So there's reasons to do it, but you just got to realize you just kind of you're playing your video game on expert level now, not on
right.
medium.
There are, as cliche as it is to say, because it's been said a million times about everything, there are levels to this with regards to racing. There really, really are. I can think of a few of the levels that I went up. You bought your car and then bolt on parts, and then the first time you run into a problem where you bolt on one manufacturer's product, and this is a bolt on for a stock car, but then the two don't play. My good friend Scott said once you bolt on one thing, there's no such thing as a bolt on after that. And I think those people are OEM plug and play applications. I'm going to bolt this turbocharger on. I'm going to get with a tuner. We're going to flash it. We're going to put it on E85, bigger injectors, bigger fuel pump, intake, exhaust, FP green. I mean, that's a fun car. Put a clutch in it whenever you need to, and then done. Just
400 horsepower on pump gas.
Insert the meme right here from Billy Madison of "Stay here as long as you can." Like, I want to tell people
is a
that
happy place.
I'd say that I regret nothing, but there's some regrets. But
well, you just got to realize the new challenges that you're going to be dealing with. Because you're just going to break everything. And you don't know what you're going to break. And it would, luckily, if anybody knew how difficult it was to raise children, they wouldn't have children. But all the old people just tell you, "Oh, it's going to be great. Such a beautiful little baby, have children." But if you've ever struggled with a teenager that won't listen to you, then you realize how crazy your grandmother was when she said, "Oh, you're going to have such a great time." I mean, there's good sides to it. Of course, obviously, children
it's got ups and downs.
Definitely a gift, but trying to do a 7-second car, trying to build a 1,300 horsepower LS project, stuff's going to break a lot. It's just no way around it. And not all the ECUs that we're using have fail-safe systems that are utilized well enough either.
Right.
And if you're on the HP Tuners platform, there's nothing that's going to give you a fuel cut if your fuel pressure drops.
Right.
You're just going to find out because you have piston pieces coming out the exhaust valves.
Yeah, you made 8
that's
ashtrays.
You're going to find out that you had a fuel pressure problem.
So you go from that bolt on and you get into you're starting to ask the car to do more stuff than you originally intended. I think like that next level of prestige for me was when I bought a welder, kind of taught myself how to weld. And once you have a welder and you know how to weld, even if it's just a MIG welder, it doesn't have to be pretty, but man, once you have a welder, it's not a question of will this fit my car? I got a welder.
How long is
Everything
it going to take
fits.
me to make it fit? That's all.
Exactly. So that was a huge one for me. And then, that was what led to turn the car into, we put a LS motor in it, big turbo. The car ended up running 8 seconds in the quarter mile, drag and drive successful. I put the roll cage in it. And then we went out and ran sevens. And then now the car is completely spiraled out of control. You know what I mean? I bought this car stock, 1994 Mustang, and I've gone through all these changes that some people that you might be listening to this, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to make the same mistakes that Robert and I have over the years. And that's fine because it's a huge learning experience.
And
but
you
like,
should. You
yeah,
should.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But you go to this point where like, if I want to continue down this racing trajectory, now I have a car and I put a roll cage in it and adjusted what Ford put there for the chassis. Now I have a dedicated race chassis and I just stuck a Mustang skin on the outside. And
And the part I hate that. And you know what the part about that bothers me the most
I could have just
is
bought another
you
car.
could have just kept your car.
I know.
You could have just kept your street car. You know
I
what I mean?
I had
Yeah,
that.
there was a point in there where you could have just gone, you know what? I'm just going to detune this car a little bit, have it for the street, back it down a little bit from running those 850s, back it down a little bit, have it be a nice car to drive around. But I'm going to build a chassis car now.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to get carbon fiber panels and fiberglass panels to put on it, and you don't even have to destroy a car that way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I
But that at that point you're admitting to yourself what you're doing. Okay, if you do it the normal way, the normal like a death by 1,000 cuts ways, you can deny that you're doing it the whole way.
yes, because you're not dropping that massive chunk of change at one
Yeah,
time. You're sprinkling it
yeah,
out like me
yeah,
since
yeah.
2002 when I bought this
It's
car.
just
So
an extra $1,500 every month that I blow on this. It's
yeah.
not that big a deal, you
But then
know.
you got guys, his name gets thrown around there a lot. If you guys are familiar with street car, you're probably familiar with Brett LaSalla, Green Mustang.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that is, a lot of
Nice
people
program.
don't realize that is Snot Rocket 2.0. Snot Rocket 1.0. 2.0 came about, and Brett didn't build it. He bought that car from Joel Steele. 1.0 got too fast, and he had a street car, and he hit that fork in the road that I did, where he said, cut up a perfectly good car, or well, Joel's selling his. I'll just buy that, sell this.
Buy a chassis roller. Yeah,
And what just happened this week?
yeah.
Snot Rocket 2.0 got stripped down and sold because he's at the point now where he's going to exceed his chassis cert of 6.0 and he wants to go on to the next thing. So for me, the decision was simply made because it was just sentimental. That's it. It's a 94 Mustang. They're a dime a dozen. I could have bought one for $800, but that would not have been my car. Not the smart decision. But I've gone through every phase of building from the bolt-on all the way up into the excessively out of control with my own personal car, and then helped out a lot of other projects throughout the years. But you're going to go from that 450 bolt-on, and if you stick with it long enough, odds are you're going to carve out a niche. And whether that is, I just want 450 horsepower, or I want to go out and race and beat the dog shit out of my car forever, or maybe it's just a phase. So you got to kind of ask yourself, future-proof your projects is what I like to call it. If you think you're going to stick around with this for a long time, bear in mind that that might be some decisions that you make. So, okay.
Future-proof it, but don't buy the camshaft for the next motor and put it in this motor. Don't buy the intake and the turbos for the motor you're going to build and try to put it on this motor. You're never going to have fun that way either. So you want to future-proof, but at the same time, you also don't want to mix and match setups, and that's a fine, path to weave through sometimes.
Yes, and I feel like I am somebody who has done that, where I'm like, I have bought many a part that was definitely not what I needed, not ideal for the situation, but I bought it anyway because I'm gonna grow. It's like buying. I really like these pants.
I have the problem the other way around. I get some pants and they're a little tight, and I think I'm going to lose some weight. That doesn't work.
Okay, so OEM replacement stuff. We're graduating a little bit. I got my first real paying job, and I kind of want to start taking this a little bit serious. I got a daily driver now, in addition to my project car. It's not my
GT.
sole. That's a huge. I can't believe we didn't even talk about that. I'm going to say this real close to the microphone. Do not make your daily driver your project car when you are. Just don't.
Amen.
Try not to.
Can I tell you a line I've heard more than once
Yes.
from people that have broken their project car? Oh my God, I've got to get this fixed right away. My wife is pregnant and this is our only car.
I've had I've had people
I'm
call
like,
me and
wait
say
a minute,
that. Yeah.
what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
This is like this is something to just blow up and play with. This is not like this,
If you
man, I'm
sold that
sorry,
man a
dude.
turbocharger, did you ever
I'm
see
like, I regret it. I couldn't tell she was pregnant over the phone.
Yeah.
There's no checkbox on the website. Is your wife pregnant? If she
Right,
is,
right.
you may not buy this turbo. Yeah.
Please check. Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
don't
what's
think anybody would answer that correctly anyway.
no, no, absolutely not. But yeah, having a daily driver slash project car, man, you're
No, you
really
need a pickup truck,
yeah.
okay? Because you need to be able to haul your broken project car around to different places to get different kinds of help from different people. You need to be able to haul it over to the tuning location, or you need to be able to haul it over to the fabricator guy so that he can weld up your downpipe for you if you're not welding yourself.
Hmm.
You know, you need to be able to get your car around. And then also when you break it at the drag strip, you need to have your pickup truck and your trailer there so that you can just take it home with
Hmm.
you. You know,
I will say the ones that don't listen to that advice and are hardcore and pull it off and make it work, you have all the respect in the world for me. Like,
yeah, but they ruin it for everybody else because they make everybody think it's good. It's easy. It's going to work out that way.
yeah,
And that's
this
the
is
exception. You know,
you
it's the
only see the
exception.
successes. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah,
the thing with
yeah.
and to go back
Nobody
to
makes an Instagram reel about how they just blew up and it took them until 4:30 this morning to get all their shit collected and back to the house
sure.
because nobody tells a story about that.
Hmm.
But that happens a lot more than people get first place trophies for sure. And the new guy doesn't know all that yet.
Yes.
The new guy hasn't. People don't read as many books about this as they used to. And if people are inclined to read books, I would recommend the Corky Bell book, Maximum Boost, and the Hugh McInnes book, Turbochargers. So if you are listening to this podcast and you're like, man, I'm just really into turbochargers. I love all this stuff, but like I'm not really grasping a lot of some of the technical things that these guys are talking about, or I want to know more than what they're talking about right now. Those two books are a great place to start.
We're getting into the point now where I got a truck, I got a project car, I got some cash. I want to go fast. Now, turbocharger sizing, OEM stuff aside, let's start talking about our T3, T4. Where's the T3, T4, T6? Like, where does that? Who made up this measurement, if you will, this designations?
Okay, okay. Well, they've turned into pretty good frame size descriptors for the most part at this point. But T3, T4, T6, these are all designations that are inherently created by Air Research, Garrett, Rotomaster throughout the years. And those three companies have kind of been a part of each other or owned each other at one point or another in history. They're not really the same companies anymore. Rotomaster's different than Garrett and Air Research, but there was a lot of overlap in these things back in the day. I'm talking about 60s and 70s and 80s. But essentially, Garrett is responsible for T3, T4, T6 design nomenclature. You talk about the T3 frames. You have flow rates from maybe 25 pounds a minute up to maybe about 35 pounds a minute. As
So,
Garrett used them for OEM applications like the SVO or the Chrysler Turbo 2.2s back in the 80s. That's where you saw that.
gotcha. But before we get too far, when you say the frame, the chassis, T3, T4, T6, essentially are the size of the turbo, like the base size, not the wheel, the
Not the
turbo and the
airflow size.
compressor,
No,
nothing. Just the basically the middle of it, right? The
the
chassis, if
word
you will.
is form factor.
Okay.
Okay, it's a form factor. So when you say T4, you're expecting it to be this long from the compressor side to the turbine side. You're expecting it to have a flange on it that has holes in this pattern. You're expecting the opening to have an opening that's the known diameter.
Mhm.
You're expecting it to have a 4-inch intake on the compressor side and a 2.5-inch discharge, and it to have a 1/8 NPT oil in and a 1.625 bolt spacing on a drain pattern, and
Sure.
maybe not water and maybe water.
It's the
It could be
similar
20
of
pounds and just be about as big as a football.
so it's similar to if I take out a small block Chevy, I can put in another small block Chevy. If I take out the 305, I can put a hot 383. It will bolt in, but there
Yeah,
are some differences in its
same,
capabilities and
same.
componentry. So
Yeah.
T3, 4, and 6. Is there a 5?
Not exactly. No.
Okay. Um, so that's just kind of the industry standard. So if you ever hear those T3, that kind of thrown out there quite a bit, it gets used quite a bit. Most of your race stuff nowadays, especially on the big VA stuff, is going to be your T6, 4-cylinder below, six
T6 frame,
cylinder.
and
Yeah,
within T6, there's kind of medium and then large frame T6s. So
right.
medium frame T6s is kind of like your in the Garrett world, it's like your GTX 47 and 50, and then the large frame T6 would end up being like the GT 55s. S400s, medium frame as T6 flange would be S400, like an 80 millimeter S400. Um, uh, with the T6 inlet on it. But then you could also have S500s that also are T6, but much larger and heavier turbochargers. So
Gotcha. And then another thing, I'm sure he'll say this multiple times. He was talking about, you say pounds per minute of air or
yeah,
pounds
I'm
per
talking
hour.
about how much pounds per minute. I'm talking about the flow rate of air that the turbo is delivering. Yeah,
And basically, what that translates to is how much power can this thing make? You need massive air introduced with a certain mass of fuel to make a certain size explosion in order to produce a certain amount of power. And
bingo.
that is how you can kind of determine the capabilities of the turbo. Now, there are also certain factors to be taken into account, which we'll talk about here soon, where, yeah, it may be delivering that massive air, but is it doing it efficiently and effectively?
A lot of
Wow.
times people think about flow rate and CFM. CFM and pounds per minute are kind of interchangeable if you make some assumptions about the conditions of the air.
Yes.
Um, so
Temperature, etc.
so like if you like back in the day, you'd talk about a carburetor like, ooh, that's a 750 double pumper,
Mm-hmm.
750 CFM, but 750 CFM was just like how much air you could suck through that carburetor at a certain amount of pressure drop through the carburetor. I don't know what that was, but um, at a standard 72 degrees Fahrenheit and 110 kPa
Yeah.
pressure.
Sea level. Yeah.
Some sort of standard, and there's multiple standards you can use definitely. But when you talk about pound per minutes of air, pounds per minute of air flow, now we're kind of beyond having to deal with the ambient temperature and pressure conditions because we are mass based now.
Right.
So we no longer have to concern ourselves with the temperature and the inlet conditions. We're just talking about mass flow rate. And the nice thing about dealing with mass flow rate, thinking about terms in airflow in terms of mass flow rate, is a lot of your ECUs are going to output mass flow rate of fuel delivered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got your ECU and it's telling you how many pounds per minute of fuel flow that you had, and then you got your AFR ratio right there, and it's saying you did it at 12 to 1. Well, then you multiply that fuel flow rate by that air fuel ratio, and that's how much air you used,
Right.
also.
And you can also
Okay,
use that to calculate how much horsepower you're making. And it's
bingo,
really close.
because 1 pound per minute of airflow rate from your turbocharger is generally considered to be good for what? About 10 wheel horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's weird that it's kind of a universal truth,
Yep. It's
I
physics.
mean,
It's all physics. It's
it
and it's
sometimes you might have a car that's got really good VE, it really breaks good brake specific fuel consumption, and it might be able to make 12 horsepower per pound minute.
mm-hmm.
You might have a really crappy cylinder head, 2 valve cylinder head, and might can only maybe make 9 pound per minute. But whatever, as far as a Persh approximation of what sort of flow rate you want for a turbocharger, if you want to make 1,000 horsepower, having a turbocharger that does a good job of flowing 110 pound a minute is probably a good place to start.
Hmm.
Just that simple math right there. You don't need to be a physics guy. You don't need to be an engineer or anything like that to just think about it in these basic ways. Okay. 1 pound a minute of airflow is good for 10 horsepower. So,
So
if you got a 300, if you got a 30 pound a minute flow rate, if you're operating the engine at a particular point, you're flowing 30 pounds a minute, then you're making 300 horsepower if your timing is correct and you're not losing it somehow.
right. To expand on, and if you can't wrap your head around like what is the difference between CFM and pounds per minute. So CFM is cubic feet per minute, which is a measure of volume or displacement, if you will. Pounds per minute is obviously a measurement. It's a unit of mass or
Yeah.
weight. Weight and mass are different. Mass becomes weight when gravity gets involved. Anyway, not to get down the physics rabbit hole here, but if I have a if I have two bricks in my hands and I'm at sea level, and then I go up to say 10,000 feet on top of a mountain, those two bricks still weigh the same, right? If I have 1 cubic foot of air in a bag at sea level, and then I go up to 10,000 feet, that bag is going to be way bigger. It's
Mm-hmm.
now 2, 3 cubic feet,
Mm-hmm.
but it still weighs the same. It still has the same amount of mass. So that's why we talk about it in pounds per hour. It makes it more consistent. The way your heat's going to affect it, your altitude's going to affect how things perform. We can go way down the rabbit hole on that stuff because I just listened to a Shane T podcast on talking about Pikes Peak, and man,
Oh, boy,
I was
if you
loving it. I know he's a
if you
friend of
want to
yours.
listen to somebody talk about this topic that has totally got it all wrapped up, listen to Shane T talk about
It was great. And the HP Academy podcast, he was just on there, and I understand that somebody
it.
else might be on there soon. I don't know if you can talk about it or not, but yeah, it was a good listen. Listen to that one where he talks about using a turbocharger on Pikes Peak hill climb. That's what kind of brought the 10,000 feet
That's a
reference into
great
my head.
challenge. I love working on Pikes Peak projects with Shane because he's so data driven. He knows exactly what he needs, and
Hmm.
it makes it really easy for me to give him something that gives him a great result. I
Yeah,
love working with Shane.
yeah. The compound turbo was it SR20 that you guys
That
were
yeah, that was that was nuts, man. Yeah,
like
that's
listening to him
nuts.
talk about that, it finally like I kind of knew what compound turbocharging is. I've seen it in truck and tractor pull and or diesel trucks and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And until I listened to him talk about it, that was when it made like again that level of enlightenment where you get into like I love using analogies for stuff. The one that I kind of came up with, I'm like, all right, the fins on the turbo are basically grabbing air and moving this massive air, which is the same thing as I need to lift up weight, but this is going to bend when I put too much on it. How can I keep this from bending? Well, you put another turbo in front of it, and now you got air pushing against it, and it can
Mhm.
help you move that weight. And
Mhm.
that when I realized that, I'm like, oh, it makes you take the complicated and uncomplicated, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this. So anyway, we're digressing. So basically, T3, T4, T6, these are industry standards, and it sounds like when Garrett was the only name in the industry, well, they gonna get to take it and make up whatever they
Yeah, well,
want.
somebody has to call it something.
Yeah.
T4 was basically an industrial frame size turbocharger. Okay, so T4 was tractors, generator sets, stationary motors. Uh, T4 is just a little bit bulkier version of T3. T3 is like, hey, we're going to put it in an automobile, and efficiency matters. So
Yeah.
we're going to make a little bit lighter version of the T4. They already made T4.
And
So
to clarify, efficiency in that case means we need the turbo to spool efficiently, fast, quick. Not how efficient can this
not
thing make power.
and even more so than that, we need the turbo to not to weigh 2 pounds less
Yeah.
because we're trying to make everything on the car weigh less. And you might think that's a recent thing, but they've been trying to make cars weigh less for a long time. They just got better at it now.
Yep.
And part of the reason we were able to make so many good direct fit hybrid turbochargers was because they weren't good at minimizing weight yet. So when they made an exhaust housing, the wall was, half an inch thick. I could machine that and put a larger blade inside of it.
Hmm.
You get to newer, brand new cars, you get to like 2018 year model stuff, and they no longer cast the housing with a thick wall. They're using a more sophisticated alloy, stainless alloy or high nickel alloy. And it might have a 1/8 inch wall or a 1/4 inch wall, and you can't just go in there and cut it bigger. You make a hole in.
It's the same reason cars like it wasn't just in turbochargers. I mean, think about the 4G63, the 2JZ, all these legendary motors that were overbuilt from the OEMs. It was just because like, hey, we need these things to be reliable. So they are weight conscious, but they also need it to be more robust. So the turbocharger stuff, we can't have housings cracking. So just make it thick, make it out of cast iron, and let's get it done. And now manufacturing and technology is caught up, like you said. So
well, the science is there for it now, so we could
yeah,
do, you could do a lot better analysis and prediction today than you could in 1995. So
sure. So and then we get to T6, which I believe that isn't that, again another industrial turbo, also coming from like commercial trucking,
over
correct?
the road trucks,
Yeah,
yes,
semi
and
big
heavy and
rigs.
larger heavy equipment, larger
Does
bulldozers.
so originally that was the Borg Warner design, correct? The S400, if you will.
S400's Borg Warner's creation.
I,
Yeah,
th-
very popular. Very like that. Maybe that's one of the most popular turbochargers in the last 20 years. Yeah.
I think the one thing that kind of, yeah, I mean, I think when Borg Warner, the S475, that was, I believe, wasn't that the original? That was the only one that they really made,
Yeah,
or
17701 part number. That was your 75 millimeter cast wheel with a 9688 turbine housing with a 132 turbine housing on it, man. When those came out, and you could buy those as an aftermarket part with that part number, and they were under
yeah,
$1,000. People couldn't believe it.
I bought one for $75, or it's not $75, $700 for a 75
Yeah.
millimeter turbo with a
Mhm.
ceramic coated
Mhm.
housing on it. And in my head, my buddies were like, and this is kind of when the lower cost stuff, turbochargers, kind of started. Sloppy mechanics and all that stuff started coming around, and
Yeah.
my buddies were like, "Man, you're," at that time it was like, "No, you have to spend $3,000, $4,000 on a turbo or $2,000, whatever."
Well,
Uh,
that's where we came from import stuff for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they were kind of like, "Man, you're really rolling the dice here." And the justification I had was, I was like, "Dude, this thing came off a semi truck. These things spend millions of miles on the road under boost,
Just sitting
probably."
there at 30 pounds of boost all day long, just
Yeah,
hauling bananas across the country.
a
Yeah.
little 9 second rip is not going to do, you know. So
Yeah.
it's a very
Not
robust
never. Yeah.
turbocharger platform. Not the lightest, but it is definitely robust. But even then, when you start getting to big power, you run into some limitations. And then there's some other designations. You mentioned one of them earlier in the beginning of the show, the GT series, like GT35, GT55. Where does the GT stuff come into play?
You're going to trace that back to the 1999 release of the Garrett Ballistic Concepts catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's where all that stuff released, basically. Um, and that was a dude named Todd Kaneko was responsible for that. He's an engineer over at Mazda now. He's a good guy. But that was when you saw the GT 2860 RS Disco Potato come out in that catalog. You saw the GT 3076 come out. You saw the
So
GT 3582 come out in that catalog. That whole up and down the range. And those were all cast wheels, but they were ball bearing. This is when ball bearing came out as a big deal, was
mhm.
1999 with the Garrett Ballistic Concepts catalog. And that's where you started to see the designation GT for Garrett Turbo. But, yeah.
So are all GT turbos ball bearing?
Uh, okay, just as a nomenclature nerd, no.
Okay.
Okay, but the ones that have R and as a suffix R.
Okay.
Okay, so there were some models of turbos like GT 4202 that were built both as journal bearing and ball bearing.
Okay.
GT 4202 meaning it had a 42 size frame size turbine wheel in it, and then O2 meant the compressor wheel was a 102 millimeter extruder.
Okay, and what's that 42 designation? You said
Uh,
42 size. Like, how do they come to that?
And I found no correlation between like the discharge area, the diameter, nothing. I can correlate nothing
So just kind of
measurable
making shit up
about
as
the
they go.
parts that have anything to correlate to those numbers.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay. I think in their mind, they start with small numbers and go to bigger numbers,
Yeah.
So
Uh,
the range currently goes from like GT10 or something all the way up to GT60.
Hmm.
So a really large range of turbine sizes.
So I think for me, the reason I'm kind of poking you here on this is even still, as somebody who's had a turbo car for I don't know how long this at this point and done a decent amount of stuff with it, I still cannot unpack like the numbers. So like if I'm talking to somebody at the track, if you I know the S400 series. If you go, I got an S488. I go, okay, that's a Borg Warner turbo, base turbo, S400 chassis, 88 millimeter on the compressor. Beyond that, I don't know AR, what's the turbine, the back, all that stuff. So if you come to me with a similar turbo from Garrett and their GT series, and you rattle off the numbers, I don't know what you're saying. You might as well
the
be speaking to
GTX
me in Spanish.
4733. What does that mean?
No clue.
You really do have to study the language of it, really.
Uh-huh.
And the trouble with it is there's not always consistency from brand to brand, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
On
so
on what they measure, correct? Like Borg and Garrett
let
do
me
it
talk
totally
about
different.
that for a second,
Yeah, here we
okay?
go.
Somebody decided at some point that they wanted to make their turbocharger sound bigger than it really was. So instead of like everybody else in the whole damn world
The
talk
old
about what the
banana in the
minor
pants trick.
diameter, instead of everybody talking about what this diameter of the turbine wheel is. This is a smaller diameter turbine wheel. And so like say in this particular one I have right here is a GT45 turbine wheel. They got too hot, by the way. You see how it's all blue right here.
Nice.
So this is a GT45 turbine wheel. This is 81 millimeter right here, but it's 85 millimeter right here. So at some point, somebody said, you know what, we're going to talk about this turbo. We're going to say it's an 85 millimeter turbo wheel
Nice.
because it is right here.
Right.
But everybody thinks you're talking about this diameter.
And
Okay. And people go, oh, I have a 96 millimeter turbo wheel. And I'm like, bro, how do you spool that? It's like, no, it's 96. And then like after an hour of talking to them, you realize they actually have an 88 millimeter turbo wheel. It's 96 right here, but it's 88 right here.
right.
This is silly. This is silly. The diameter right here is completely irrelevant for considering the flow rate of the turbocharger. This can be really big and it doesn't change the flow rate at all. So talking about this major diameter, this would be called, this is the inducer part of the turbo wheel.
Yep.
This is the exducer part of the turbo wheel. Inducer is where the air comes in. Exducer is where it exits. Okay. So this is the exducer diameter and this is the inducer diameter right here.
Think of it
So
as a funnel. You got the big funnel. You can put all the water in there you want, but it's got to go through the hole in the
but it's
bottom
got
of
to
it.
go through the little hole in the bottom, and this is a little hole in the bottom. So really, you really kind of want to know what size the hole in the bottom is, more than you want to know anything else. So somewhere in here, people started selling S400 turbochargers, and instead of telling you that it's an 88 millimeter turbo wheel, they decided to say they all had 96 millimeter turbo wheels in it, which is kind of silly if you think about it, because that's not the part of it that matters. So
Gotcha.
now I don't do that. If I'm telling you the dimensions of my turbocharger, I'm not trying to make it sound bigger than it really is by talking about this diameter instead of this diameter. I'm
When
like,
I would tell people when I had your HTZ on my car, and they're like, "Oh, what's the turbine? 92 millimeter." And they're like, "Where did you get a
how's so small?
smaller
Yeah.
than the 96?" I'm like, "It's not." And like, that's gonna choke the car. It'll never work. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
that.
Let me back up. It's a 99 millimeter turbo.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got a fistfuls of 80
Yeah.
slips that say otherwise, buddy. But
And
sure.
when we released that 8892, so many people were like, why would I want to use a smaller turbo wheel? And I'm like, this is the one that has the larger turbo wheel in it.
Yeah.
The other one is an 8888. It has 88 millimeter turbo wheel, you know. But I thought it had 96. So the part that nobody cares about is 96.
Yep. Yep.
So let's just continue to not care about that and stop talking about it, because you need to know what the exducer diameter is, because that's where your choke flow is happening and that's what's relevant.
Yep. So let's see. Do I want to go down that rabbit
If
hole?
you had a part
Quite
of your body,
yet?
like say I wanted to measure how long my hand was, okay.
Yeah.
I want to have a real big hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can start measuring here, right, to measure how long my arm is, or I could just start at my elbow for some reason,
Yeah.
right?
When I want to
And then
measure
go,
my hand, I usually.
wow, look how long my hand is. Well, if you start measuring in the wrong place, yeah, it seems really large.
I don't know about you, when I want to measure my arm, I usually start at the base of my. All right, so we know the sizes. We kind of have a roundabout area of the designations. We're built a fast car now at this point, getting a little bit older, and we want to take this serious. I want to put this one on the shelf. And now you're in my position where I am kind of in real life, if you think about it. Is the primary consideration for a clean sheet of paper, if you're building your perfectly fast, pick a chassis, pick a platform, whatever you want, are you thinking motor first or do you think turbo first?
No, I would, okay, normally I would think motor first, but sometimes race, uh, actual racing for money, racing for prize money, there are turbo class limitations. So if you're in a class where you know what you're going to weigh and you know what engine you're going to have, I'm talking about World Cup finals, for example. If you know what you're going to be limited to on a turbo, well, then you do kind of want to start there. Okay. And then you want to do the motor to complement to best work with whatever the turbo limitation is going to be. So you may not want to use as big a motor as you thought, or you might want to use a bigger motor than you thought, depending on how you fit into the classes. So if you're class racing and you know that you're racing in the 67.9 millimeter limited class and you're allowed to have one of those turbos, well, then you kind of already know most of your limitation right there. So now you're going to try to do a motor that makes the best power on that turbocharger. But a lot of V8 classes are not really turbo limited. If you go half mile racing or land speed racing or Pikes Peak racing, a lot of other types of racing, they're not turbochargers that are limited. So in those applications, you would pit the motor first, and then we would select turbochargers to fit the motor. That's the normal way to do it. Motor
Gotcha.
first, and then pick turbochargers to achieve the power band for the motor that you have.
At the end of the day here, it's making one complements the other. That's the key of what we're talking about here. Um, I've seen it in the past where somebody has a turbo car and they have a combination that's dialed in really good. If I have a 6 liter, say I have a 408-inch LS motor, and I have a big, call it 91 millimeter turbo on the thing, and something happens, I hurt my motor, I have to make an event. If I take that 5.3 that I got sitting over in the corner, throw it in the car, it's not going to act the same. It's a smaller motor. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The maximum power potential is still going to be uh, um, determined by the turbocharger
Yeah.
because the air has to go through. You can only fit a certain mass of air or volume, whichever one you prefer, through a certain size opening. The difference between that 408 and that 5.3 liter, that 327 cubic inch motor, is where in the power band you are making that power. Neither
Right.
one of those motors are more capable or incapable than the other. It's just a matter of at which RPM, all things being equal. There's a shitload of varying factors in this, but if you kind of like try to break it down to just the cubic inch size and you could, in theory, control everything else, the power production out of those two will be the same.
Could be the
But
same. Could be the same. And but the caveat to that is in that specific application, you got like a 4 1/8 inch bore versus a sub four
yes,
inch bore.
yes.
So now we have smaller valves. So what we're probably going to see that we need to do in the case to make up for the motor being different is we might have to run 5 more pounds of boost.
Right, right,
But then we will have the same power.
right. So what I'm saying there is there are at the end of the day, the turbocharger is the one that determines what you're gonna make. Obviously, like you
Bottom
said,
line.
there are costs. Maybe that 5.3. Not saying that you can take a stock 5.3 out of the junkyard and go and slap around a 408. It's not. It's the 408. I'm assuming you have a built motor. What I mean by that is just we're just talking about cubic inches. The capability of
Mm-hmm.
the other components involved, forged
Mm-hmm.
rods, pistons,
Mm-hmm.
rotating assembly, and the strength. I'm simply talking about the size of the actual displacement of the
Right,
motor.
right. Just for
The motor's an air
displacement.
pump, a turbo's an air pump, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
how efficiently you can move the air through those two systems. A 408 is going to be more efficient at moving air through that turbo and through itself at a lower RPM than a 5.3 because it needs to spin up higher.
Yeah,
So
the VE is going to be a little different because of the ports and the valve sizes and so on and so forth. So the power band, you nailed it. The power band is what's going to be different about it. And then the boost curve that you need to get back to the same power as the bigger motor, that boost curve is going to probably look a little different too.
to further that point, when you're talking about the difference between the power production of a big motor versus small motor, and you can even go down the rabbit hole of comparing big V8 to small four cylinder. Put a 60 millimeter turbo, or you said 69 millimeter turbo. What class is that for?
There's a S front wheel drive, I think, has two turbos you can use, a 67.9 and then a 73.9 millimeter. Most of
And
them are on 73.9.
roughly, what do those cars trap or run? Do they run
They
or like,
they
power
they
production? Because they're
they,
bigger
they
kids on wheels. They're super
okay
light.
for the last 400 foot of the pass, they're probably making 1200 horsepower, but they can't put that down until the very end because they're front wheel drive.
Out of a single
74,
74.
73.9 class. Yeah,
Okay.
73.9 class probably. I think
For,
you can run two. There's a weight break. So if you are heavier, then you get to run the bigger turbo. If you're lighter, if you're really, really light, then you
sure.
have to run a smaller size turbo. I think there's something like that.
So we have a small turbo on a small motor that's capable of making 4-digit horsepower. Take that same turbo and put it on a big V8 motor. Is it going to make that same power?
No,
Probably no, not even
no.
close.
Here's why. Because what you have for specialization and compressing for the four cylinder is a totally different focus and specialization than what you need for compressing on the V8. On
Yeah.
the V8, we are going to run maybe 35 pounds of boost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to maybe run a 3-to-1 pressure ratio on a compressor. On the K20 motor, K24 motor with a single 74 millimeter on it, we might be running 70 pounds of boost, 75 pounds of
Mm-hmm.
boost. So you need uh, a turbo that works very good at the top of the compressor map in the high pressure ratio area for this class racing small motor stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where on V8 stuff, where like say you got 10 cylinder Audis or 10 cylinder Vipers or big V8 LS7 motors or something like that, we're probably not going to run 75 pounds of boost. We're kind of going to explode the motor before we get there. So generally speaking, you achieve the maximum mechanical limit of those motors at a lower boost pressure, probably 35 pounds
Right.
of boost, something like that, 40 pounds of boost, maybe.
So some people might be thinking, but Rye, you just said earlier that that turbo is going to make the same power regardless of the motor you strap it onto. I use power as a relative term. So
Well,
horsepower,
you had a really specific comparison there. That was the
yeah,
5.3 versus the
sure,
408. And what did we talk about there? We said, yeah, the boost pressure would have to go up a little bit for the
right,
smaller
right,
motor in order to achieve the same motor. So now stretch that out to an 8 liter versus a 2 liter.
mm-hmm.
Okay, it's just stretched out even further. And so yeah, on the 2 liter to make the same power, we'll have to reach a much higher pressure ratio. And
Right,
this is where it comes in. This is where you need a turbo expert. Okay, you don't just need to know it's a 62, 66 now. You need to talk to somebody that's got a calculator and some compressor maps, and you need some good advice.
yep,
Okay, because now you get really, really specialized.
yeah,
This is way past ice cream and burnouts. This is
yep.
way into, well, we're going to do some math, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
That
So
little 70 something millimeter turbo that pushed a Honda deep into very fast territory would be fantastic on your V8 to go get ice cream. However, that's an apples to oranges comparison. It really what it boils down to is again efficiency. The two got to complement each other, and the reason that turbo is capable of crazy power on a small motor horsepower is it is producing on that little four-cylinder motor the same torque that roughly that you would be producing if you put that same turbo on a V8 application. So if you think about the relationship between horsepower and torque, we're going down a crazy rabbit hole. I'm actually working on a video for this. Horsepower is kind of a made-up thing. It doesn't really matter. The torque that the engine produces, it matters in that it's consistent. It's a consistent unit of
torque is
measurement.
what you can measure. Horsepower is what you calculate after you know the torque.
Yes, yes, because the best way. There's a million different acronyms. I got a really good one I'll throw out there, but the two ways that I describe it to somebody so that is Horsepower is the application of torque over repetitions or time, i.e.,
over time based,
RPM.
yeah, time
Yes.
based torque. Yeah.
So what that means is, I'll go back to, I love analogies. If I got a pallet of bricks, so I got 2 pallets of bricks, and I need to get them up a flight of stairs. If I was capable of doing so, if I'm a big, burly V8 guy, I'm going to pick up the pallet of bricks and I'm going to carry it up the stairs in one trip. It's going to break my back. It's going to blow my knees out. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck, but I'll get it up there.
It'll creak the stairs. Yeah.
That is big torque, rod folding territory. Your knees, your back, and all that stuff. That is the rods. That is your rotating assembly inside of your motor. Now, the little Honda, the little V8, or I'm sorry, the little 4-cylinder Honda turning crazy RPM is going to move that same pallet of bricks up the stairs in the exact same amount of time as your powerlifter guy taking it, trudging up. But he's going to be zipping up and down the stairs multiple times. Maybe it takes him 10,
now
11
you think
trips.
of a conveyor belt with one brick at a time, but the row of bricks just flying up the stairs, one by one.
So that is turning more RPM. So when you have a smaller motor that is more capable of, what's going on there is that boils down to that's volumetric efficiency of the motor. The little 4-cylinder guy, he's not taking enough time to pick up more than one brick and then run it up the stairs. Whereas the big V8 guy, the piston comes down, it draws in all the air, all the fuel, fills that entire cylinder up. He's picking up everything. It's like, I mean, I don't know about you, Robert. How many trips? You come back from the grocery store, doesn't matter how many groceries are in that car. How many trips are you making to that front door?
Oh, I'm going to try to make it one, dude.
It's one trip. One trip. That's it. If anything else, that's no man's land. That's the no fly zone. So that's your difference between horsepower and torque. That V8 may not make the horsepower that 4-cylinder car does, but they are making the same amount of torque. And that's the difference between winning races, is because that thing's turning more RPM.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And that was one of those things we've talked about, levels of enlightenment, or the levels to this, and kind of like when you wrap your head around that, man, that was one that was like, man, it makes so much more stuff, makes so much more sense, because I could never really, you can still talk to some guys that are, V8 turbo guys, and, we talk about, oh, so-and-so with a 70 millimeter Supra, or a 76 millimeter turbo on a Supra. And they're like, 76? That thing will never make power. I'm like, yeah, it makes like 1,400 horsepower. Like, no way, dude. I had a 76 on my car. Well, you had a 6-liter V8. Like, it's a completely different thing.
It's a different air pump. You're feeding a different air pump. The turbocharger, like you said, for a turbocharger is an air pump, but it's an air pump that feeds the other air pump. The other air pump's the motor. So you got to look at what does the motor do good, and then you've got to pick a turbo that does the same thing good that the motor does good. I'd like to do another one of these where we kind of compare and contrast the 2-liter and look at compressor maps, and then compare and contrast to a 5-liter, where we want to kind of have the same power roll, but we're going to do it a different way. And I'll just walk through all the steps of exactly where you end up on the compressor map for 2, and why you might want to run almost the same size turbo, but with 2 different arrows, because you want one compressor map that works really good at higher pressure ratios for the small motor. And then on the other application, you want a turbocharger that works better in the medium or low pressure ratios, because that's how that larger motor is going to eat its air. So I think that we should come back and do that.
I think so. I think compressor maps are a voodoo that not a lot of people
deep dive on that.
Understand for sure. I'd love to do that.
You know my chalkboard, so
I was looking at it. But yeah, that is something that I don't think a lot of people that know a lot about cars, that they don't understand. There's like, oh, that's just some cheated up magic turbo, and it's not magic. It's science.
There's no magic to it. The magic of it is like why they don't all explode, because they're glowing red. They spin a bajillion RPM. They got 50 pounds of pressure and stuff. They're like glowing red spinning grenades that you hope don't break. So I don't know. I almost can't imagine a more challenging part to make than a turbocharger. Okay, because if you think what happens to the turbocharger after you build it and you send it to somebody, you hope they connect it to a motor that has some oil pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You hope they connect it to a motor that has really clean oil. You hope they connect it to a motor that has EGT that's in a certain range. You hope they connect it to a motor that doesn't have any charge leaks. You hope they connect it to a motor that allows air to get to the turbocharger. It doesn't have any inlet restrictions. You're hoping that all these things happen after you sell the guy the turbocharger, but you have no way of making sure any of those things happen, you know? So the turbocharger is kind of like an organ donor. You have a perfectly good heart that you pulled out of an unfortunately young deceased person, and you're going to transplant it. If the transplant doesn't take, it's not necessarily the heart's fault.
Right.
You had to put the heart into something, and then that something had to keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah. It's especially like, I mean, nowadays where you can buy your Amazon parts to get, oh, I have an entire turbocharger oil supply kit, and then you get that fitting. I can't tell you how many times I've seen those fittings that you get from with the flange. It's got the AN fitting on it, and it looks like a nitrous jet. It looks like a pinhole.
tiny little hole in it. Yeah.
I'm sure that
You
that
better hope
restrict.
you're going to use a ball bearing turbo then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't always. Like, I'll have people send me S400s back, and they'll have had a fitting like that on it,
Mm-hmm.
last every bit of 40 minutes,
I'm surprised it lived that long.
of running.
It's running on assembly lube basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. We've talked about a lot of stuff here today. We went from covering the basics and the wave tops, and then also kind of touching the wave tops of some of the deep dives. I think this is a good introduction, little preview here. We'll throw this up and we'll see what the response is. Let us know what other subjects you want to talk about. Compressor map reading, that would be a fantastic one, because I would feel like every time I look at a compressor map, I feel like I am in a foreign country trying to read a map in a foreign language. It can be a little intimidating.
I would love to spend some time explaining and talking about that, and answering some questions about that. Maybe we should do that the next time.
Awesome. All right, Robert, I appreciate all your time today. Thank you very much for joining us. And
You bet, Ryan.
head over to forceperformance.net or .shop. Follow us on social media, on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And yeah, we look forward to doing more of these. And let us know what you guys want to hear. Comment, subscribe, and follow for more. Later.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Boost on, y'all.